Remember the old saying that nothing is certain except death and taxes? Well, taxes are certain for sure, but researchers and leading scholars are now determined to treat death as a disease and to eradicate it. Yeah, I mean, make it possible for you to live 2 or 300 years or forever. Now, this is part one of a two-part program on whether we humans actually have to see death as part of life. We'll look at the scientific research that is being done all over the world and whether, in fact, you or your loved ones can avoid death as we know it. Now, joining me are the co authors of a new book, The Death of Dying, Jose Corderos from Madrid and David Wood from England. So, welcome to both of you. And Jose, I'm going to tell that viewer that you and I met in August of this year down in Madrid at a Liberty conference, and you were running that program, and then you spoke on something, and I was sitting there going, what? And you were talking about the death of dying. So give that viewer just a brief idea of what you were talking about.
Sure, and thank you so much, Dennis, for inviting us to your program. David and we have been working on what we call the death of death, and in English. And this is about basically curing aging, reverse aging, and therefore killing death. And my goal in life is to kill death before death kills me.
Well, I tell you, you made a great, strong case for it, I must say, even though those of us who are born skeptics are, let's just say, a little more skeptical. Now, David, I didn't get a chance to meet you in person, but I see you there from a suburb of London, and so welcome as the co-author of The Death of Death. And you have an interesting background, and I'm going to give that viewer just a little bit of it. That is that you have been a veteran of the days of mobile computing and smartphone industries, and that's something that is with us forever, I guess, for good or bad. You're the co-author of, or the author of 12 books, which is pretty impressive, and you're also the executive director of the LEV Foundation, that is the Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation. Now, I bet there's one or two viewers who have no idea what longevity escape velocity is, so why don't you start by telling us what that is?
Dennis, escape velocity means getting away from the Earth. That's what most of us watched in the early days of the space program. These rockets went up in various stages. A little bit of explosion took them a bit higher, another explosion took them higher again, and eventually they went so fast that they broke away from Earth's pull of gravity altogether. Longevity escape velocity is the same idea, but this time, instead of escaping from gravity, we're escaping from the downward pull of aging. And we expect that will happen in various stages as well. There will be some therapies available very soon, which will allow us to live several more years younger and healthier than before. And during that period, there will be more treatments developed, which will take us to live healthier for longer. And then maybe a third and final time will push us all the way into living indefinitely young and healthily as long as we wish.
Okay, well, Jose, I know one thing about the two of you, and that is that travel is a big part of what you do. And I've looked at all the conferences that you've attended, and would it be fair to say, Jose, that even though that viewer and I were totally unaware of it, that there are conferences being held literally all over the world on these topics as we speak?
Yes, all over the world. I just came back from Argentina, where I met the new president of Argentina, who also believes in rejuvenation technologies. He believes that we might become younger in the future. And actually, he's quite a character. He has even cloned his dog. I think he's probably the only president who has cloned his dog, so that he really believes in technology. And from now, I am going to Belgrade, to Serbia, to another conference where I will be talking about the death of death, the scientific possibility of physical immortality and its moral defense, which is the subtitle of our book. And throughout this year, I have been in no less than 40 conferences, many of them related to longevity. And this is growing incredibly fast. About 20 years ago, there was probably only one conference on longevity, rejuvenation, serious conference. And now, as I said, we have so many conferences that it is almost impossible to go to all of them now.
Right. Well, I think, David, the two of you, you could go to a conference on having conferences because there's so much information. But David, you've been looking at the future in different ways for a big part of your life. Put this idea of longevity into perspective for that viewer and tell us how biotech is an example, nanotechnology, and then, of course, AI, which seems to be everywhere right now, how these things are likely to come together.
So for many years in my career, I was interested in reprogramming our silicon, our computers, our smartphones, new versions of the operating system, new applications. But I realized that something even bigger was coming, and that was reprogramming our biology. Not taking the biology that evolution had given us, but modifying it in various ways, changing the genetic code, changing the so-called epigenetics, which is what happens as a result of environment on top of our genes, reprogramming ourselves in many ways. And the second thing you mentioned was nanotech. Now, nano means incredibly small. It's 1,000 times smaller than micro, which is 1,000 times smaller than milli. And what we can look forward to is tiny, intelligent little probes or nanobots, which in due course will be able to go into our bodies and tidy up in a very precise way the damage that has accumulated in aging. We've already benefited from microsurgery. Once upon a time, if there was an operation, we were cut wide open. Now, surgeons can operate with much smaller, more precise cuts. But in the future, there won't be any cuts at all. And that's one way in which we can undo the damage that we've accumulated in aging and become much younger, much healthier.
Well, this idea of having no cuts at all will appeal to a lot of people because a lot of people obviously resist having surgery for reasons that we know, with not only expense, but the ability to come back from that surgery. Now, Jose, one of the things that you mentioned so much is the idea of freedom and liberty through Liberty International you were working with, of course, but particularly freedom and liberty to make sure that the scientific community can do its work. And yet, don't we also need to be careful because, a lot of people would say, well, we've had death literally for as long as we know history. Why would it be different now?
Well, many things are different now. For example, until 1961, no human stepped on the moon. And now, finally, humans have been to the moon, and soon we will also be stepping on planet Mars and beyond. And that was impossible until relatively recently. The same with curing diseases. We have been curing more and more diseases, stopping the bad effects of biological damage. And now I think we are very close, about 20 years away from stopping aging and reversing aging, which has been the biggest dream of humanity since we know of. Since the beginning of history, humans were looking for immortality. And finally, now we are very close to make this a reality. Again, it is coming from a dream into science reality. In fact, many science fiction authors talk about immortality, and now science fiction is becoming science reality.
Well, David, I know that one of the things that you guys talk about in, I forget which chapter it is in your book, but you talk about what has happened in the last 200 years, the average age of people, depending upon the society and the country and the world, has doubled or so, maybe quadrupled in some particular places. And yet, what I read today is that, especially in America and after COVID, it seems to me that the longevity maybe has either peaked or even has started down a little bit. How do you reconcile that with what you think can become much longer?
Well, the big reason people live much longer with the innovations over the last 100 or 200 years was the understanding of the root cause of many of the reasons why people died, namely germs. For a long time, people didn't know that germs existed. They were too small. But with the invention of microscopes and the improvements of microscopes, people could realize, hey, this is why people are catching diseases which are killing people in such large quantities. In the year 1900, why did most people in America die? The top three causes were gastroenteritis, infectious diseases of the digestion system, leading to very unpleasant diarrhea and death. Number two, tuberculosis. And number one, influenza and pneumonia. And people couldn't do much about them for most of history until they understood about germs and then understood about vaccinations and antibiotics. All improvements that stemmed from what we sometimes call the second industrial revolution. Well, we need another boost now. It's not going to be the same stuff as before. We're going to take advantage of the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution, the biotech and nanotech and artificial intelligence that we spoke about. But the main idea is that what kills us now, typically, has again a common cause, and that common cause is aging. So, why do people catch cancer? A few unfortunate people sadly catch it when they're young, but most of the people who get cancer do so because their bodies have become old. It's the same with dementia, it's the same with heart disease, it's the same with stroke. So now what we can look forward to is another wave of dramatic changes. We'll fix aging, and as a result of fixing aging, the average lifespan is going to shoot up again, shoot up so much that we'll even stop measuring it.
Well, let me just say that while this sounds a little bit incredible, where were you 50 years ago when it would have helped me is what I'm interested in knowing. Now, Jose, when you talked about in that speech the idea of death becoming a disease and we could solve the disease, there's still a lot of other diseases we haven't solved. You know, we've got the heart issues, which is probably the biggest, cancer, or those are the two biggest right now. And I think you also said that there were really great steps, especially on the cancer side, that the scientific community is looking at. Give us some examples, if you will, of what you see already happening that are going to lead into the projections you guys are making.
Yes, I am really optimistic by the incredible advances in biotechnology and the impact on medicine. For example, now that we can sequence the human genome very cheaply, we can compare cancer cells with normal cells in the individual and find the mutations in cancer. Cancer by itself is a fascinating disease because cancer cells become biologically immortal. What does that mean? That they stop aging. Cancer cells do not age biologically. That is why we need to kill them because they keep on growing, reproducing, and they are eating us out. So cancer really has discovered immortality. And now we are discovering more about biological immortality through cancer. And, cancer cells didn't go to university. They don't even know how to read or write, but cancer cells discovered immortality. So we are very close to understanding the mutations that create cancer. And some companies say that between 5 to 10 years, we will cure most cancers. In fact, maybe using vaccines. The companies that used mRNA technology for COVID are also working on cancer vaccines. So I'm really excited that between 5 to 10 years, we will cure most of cancers. And even more important, we will understand this biological immortality that cancer cells have discovered. So we truly live in the best time to be alive. We are going to be curing cancer and be curing also other diseases, including neurodegenerative diseases and also cardiac diseases, because those are the three main causes of people dying today: cancer, cardiovascular problems, and neurological diseases. And we are advancing exponentially in those three areas. But what David mentioned, which is even more important, is that we understand that cancer is really I mean, aging itself, aging is the center problem because aging is like the mother of all diseases. That is why we need to cure aging, and then we will cure cancer, we will cure neurological diseases, and we will cure cardiovascular diseases. So the main problem, the center problem is aging itself. So aging is a disease, but we believe it is a curable disease, and we will cure in the next 2 decades.
Okay, but look, Jose, I mean, truthfully, there are a lot of people, in fact, huge percentages of people around the world who, because of COVID, because of the, let's say, controversy, to say the least, over vaccines, the suspicion of pharmaceutical companies, not to mention government, not to mention, let's just say, the Bill Gateses of the world. I mean, what makes you think that people are going to open their arms and open their pocketbooks and open their arms literally to something that they'll inject to cure aging when we're concerned about whether we need to get the next booster for COVID, for heaven's sake?
Well, the situation will be very different quite soon because the COVID vaccines were experimental vaccines, a new technology, but biology has advanced a lot in the last 3, 4 years. So I think we will have better vaccines and other therapies, not just vaccines, other therapies, and we will be seeing the results. We will see that people will stop aging and, in fact, might reverse aging very soon. So when you see your friends getting younger, you will probably want the same medicine. But David also has some ideas on that, and he has been following as well the sector very, very much. So, David.
Well, as well as seeing some of our friends getting younger, something we'll see that will happen more quickly is our pet dogs getting younger. There's been a lot of research on treatments that will be given to middle-aged dogs, just dogs on the point of starting to decline, and giving them many additional years of healthy dog tail wagging life. And when people see this for the dog, they're going to wonder, could it happen for them too? Then how will we know if it's actually working for humans or not? This is where something called measurements of aging become very important, sometimes called biomarkers of aging. It's not how many candles we have on our cake, but it's scanning the state of our muscles, the state of our blood, the state of our mental system to assess our biological age. And when people see their friends becoming biologically younger by these measurements as a result of taking these treatments, whether it's injections or other things, it's going to make them much more interested in having these treatments themselves.
Well, I really like that perspective, David, but here's always the but. You know me, the skeptic. But if, in fact, this aging will stop, let's just say, or even reverse, we can do a lot of things in the short term, but how do we know what the long-term effects of all of these scientific discoveries are going to be? Because by definition, you can't until somebody goes ahead and lives for 50, 60, 70, 80 years longer than they should. What about the negative side effects, David, and how do we deal with that? How do we deal with people like me who say, I don't know if I want to do that?
Well, we've seen what happened with treatments for infectious diseases. Some people may have said they don't want to take antibiotics because there'll be bad side effects, and sometimes there are. And then we learn, this person doesn't actually cope well with this particular antibiotic, so let's give them this other one instead. And there may well be some issues and complications, but that's what engineering's all about. You get a solution and you keep monitoring it, and if there are issues, then maybe you tweak the dosage levels. You add a second treatment. By the way, I talked about curing tuberculosis. It turns out when people were just given one antibiotic against tuberculosis, this is back, I guess, in the 1940s, maybe 1950s, they had a temporary respite, but then the disease came back often more deadly than before. And it might have been thought, well, you can't overcome it. But it turned out all that was needed was to give 2 antibiotics, or nowadays people get a combination of 3, and that gets rid of the disease comprehensively. So it may well be the same. There will be some surprises and some drawbacks, but Engineering methods can figure out solutions. In any case, I say having these problems is a small thing compared to the terrible situation of today when so many people are losing their ability to live because their brains are deteriorating and their bodies are deteriorating. Let's fix that, and then if there are some side effects, let's deal with these in due course.
Well, in this program, I feel like my brain is deteriorating already, Jose. So let me pose this question to you. At what point in a person's life should these things be talked about? In other words, we've got a lot of people who are, shall we say, more than middle aged, like myself, and that seems a bit late. And yet, do we pick 20 years old? Do we pick 30? Do we pick 40? Is it something we deal with as we go? I mean, what is the optimum, if there is one, age or physical capability or mental capability in which they should be thinking about this longevity?
Okay. Actually, the objective is biological rejuvenation. So it doesn't matter how old you are because biological rejuvenation has already been proven. The Nobel Prize in Medicine of the year 2012, he discovered that we can rejuvenate old cells. So really, it doesn't matter how old you are when we have these therapies available because you will be able to rejuvenate. Talking about older people, which again we will not call them older in the future, even people who are 100 years old. But as for today's standards, my friend Ray Kurzweil, who is a very famous engineer from my alma mater, from MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, he's 75 years old, and he believes that he will reach longevity escape velocity. In fact, he is the famous person who makes most of these forecasts that we believe are probably right because he has been making forecasts for half a century and he has been over 80% correct on his forecast for half a century. So it really is incredible. And so Ray Kurzweil, he says that if we make it to 2029 to 2030, we should be able to reach longevity escape velocity. That means we gain 1 year per year we survive. And so we will be living longer and longer, even if it's still aging. And then at the latest, in 2045, Ray Kurzweil says that we will have biological rejuvenation therapies for everybody who wants to be younger. And so again, to answer your question, if people are middle age or if they are old by today's standards, he's 75 and he plans to make it. Both David and myself, we are in our early 60s, and we certainly plan to make it. I am not planning to die anytime soon.
Well, with your travel schedule, I'm not totally sure about that. So, David, let me pose this to you though, because government seems to get involved in everything. Some people would say positively about some things, other people would say negatively about many things. But is there a role for government in what you're talking about here? If so, what is that role? And is it likely to be positive or negative?
What I'm hoping government will do is put more money into researching the basic science of aging and possible treatment options at a time before it's clear that somebody can make a commercial profit from it. Once drugs and treatments have been relatively well explored, big pharmaceutical companies are willing to spend lots of money developing them further, but we need more early stage interventions. Governments have done that in the past in other fields. If we look at how the internet was created, it was created by funding from the US government, DARPA. They also put in the investment that gives us the geopositionary station, the satellite system, GPS. They put in lots of investments that result in what commercial companies subsequently turned into smartphones. So I want to see more research onto ideas on how to deal with aging. There are about 20 such ideas. We've touched on one or two in this program. There's about 20 that each deserve a heck of a lot more fundamental support from the government. The other thing the government can do is to accelerate some trials. It's very complicated. When do you allow drugs to be widely used? If there's a risk of side effects, governments are naturally careful. Well, in some cases, it can be an accelerated treatments. And some vaccines in the COVID time were released in an accelerated schedule, and possibly there's a case for releasing some of the anti-aging therapies experimentally for people who are fully informed and who consent. Let's have these treatments available more quickly so we can see the results, see what works and sometimes what doesn't work and which needs to be tweaked and modified.
Okay, now you guys have mentioned to me personally, of course, that we should all try to take care of ourselves better until this time comes. There's a guy named Dan Butner who came out with 9 ways to add years to your life so that we can be ready when this comes. And here's what he said. So we put that graphic up and move naturally, have a purpose in life, downshift your stress level, quit eating when 80% full. Now, this is difficult. Eat more plants, right? 1 glass of wine at dinner. I love that one, as opposed to 1 bottle, which a friend of mine likes. Belong to a faith-based group. Put loved ones first and find the right tribe. So, Jose, I assume that there are some things that we could do right now that would be better for us, whether or not we live forever. Am I right?
Absolutely. In fact, again, quoting my friend Ray Kurzweil in a previous book called Fantastic Voyage, Live Long Enough to Live Forever, he talks about the 3 bridges to immortality. The first bridge that takes us into the second bridge, and then finally the third bridge. Quickly, bridge 1 is what we could do until now, until the 2010s. Basically, the things that you mentioned, and also do everything that your mother told you. Eat well, sleep well, do exercise, maybe some meditation, no smoking, etc., etc. That is bridge 1 in the 2010s.
And Jose, let me stop you right there. I'm going to bridge into the second part of this program, which is going to be another program, and we can pick up where you're stopping right now, because we're just about out of time for this program and not out of time for our life. So thank you both for joining me on this, and we will come back to the problems with this in part 2. So thank you. Now, something to really think about? Yeah. The perspectives you just heard may be unique to you and me, but as you now know, thousands of folks are working around the clock to change aging as we know it. Join us for part 2 of this issue as we look at the implications of immortality, such as ethics, funding, welfare programs, education, retirement, etc. You'll get to hear even more unique perspectives then as we continue to talk about things that matter with people who care.